Are we good?
All right, welcome to episode 10
Episode 10.
of Metal and Mash.
double
We've reached
digits.
double digits. We have. And so we've got a couple of cool special things for this episode. Number one being we have a special guest named Scully. Scully here is a very old, he's got a left hip problem, so we got him popped up. He's a good dude.
Yeah.
I
And
love Scully.
he probably isn't going to talk a lot of shit.
He's not going to talk a lot of shit. He's pretty silent in his ways, and he has a lot of fun with the kids during the Halloween season.
Absolutely. But, you know, Silent Bob did a great job of having a presence without speaking much.
Indeed,
So.
and we've also got our frequent flyer guest, Dio.
Passed out Dio already.
He's always sleeping.
Oh, I mean...
The narcoleptic chihuahua.
If he ran and jumped in mid-bark, just
fell
over and fell
it
asleep.
it would not surprise me any. So keeping in the theme of old things, even though Dio's not even 4 yet.
not old. But he's acting old.
Yeah,
That's
we have
old
some
granddad.
old drinks here.
Old
What are we drinking?
Granddad 114, which is actually a Beam product. So your Beam team, everybody who drinks whiskey knows Beam at some point, but they have a low rye blend. It's typically I believe it's 13% rye in their mash bill. So the rest is corn and barley. This is part of the high rye blend. So the low rye blend, you're going to see Beam, Knob Creek, and Booker's.
No, I never heard of that one either.
Old Granddad, you have three of them. You have Old Granddad, which is their standard. They're bottle and bond. So 80 proof, 100 proof, bottle and bond. All bottle and bonds 100 proof. And then they're 114 proof. Then you have Basil Hayden. Those are the high rye blends of the Beam line. And that's going to be 27% rye, 63% corn, 10% barley. So a little bit on the spicier side of things. I was reading a review one time. Someone's talking about Old Granddad 114, and someone's comment was, "Be careful. It's going to put your dick in the dirt."
Be careful.
I mean, 114 proof's no joke. And honestly, so what we're drinking today is an old fashioned
With Old Granddad.
with Old Granddad 114. Why I like a higher proof. Well, I'm a high proof whore anyway. So if I'm even going to sip straight whiskey, which you've seen on this channel, I mean, I'll go 120, 125 proof. I have no problem sipping it neat. So if I'm going to be diluting it by putting in a mixer, putting in ice, I am probably not going to go with an 80 proof with a mixer at all, because I feel like if the point of me is appreciating the flavor in a mixed drink, I want the flavor to come out, so a higher proof's definitely necessary. But I also don't want to spend a lot of money on something I'm going to dilute. Right. So Old Granddad 114, you're probably going to find $25-$30, which in the scheme of, I mean, it's not a $12 bottle, but I appreciate my booze. I'm
I
not
feel like
just
my buddy
taking
Derek
shoots.
knows a little bit about Old Granddad. I've never had it before.
Right. So, I mean, I think you're going to enjoy it. So we made an old-fashioned today, but it's not your standard old-fashioned. Old-fashioned's typically going to be your whiskey of choice or a rye or bourbon. You're going to have bitters. You're going to have then simple syrup and usually some orange zest peel. I was watching a YouTube channel. I can't take credit for this recipe, but I fell in love with it as soon as I heard it. So we've got the Old Granddad. We have aromatic bitters, which I believe I'm using Woodford's aromatic bitters. Then instead of simple syrup, I use organic maple syrup, and instead of the orange zest, I use Luxardo cherry syrup with one cherry,
Which are delicious, by the way.
they are
so good.
amazing. And you don't even have to go try to find them in a store anymore, because Jeff Bezos,
Apparently, you can Amazon them. It's
bald-headed douche canoe,
Yeah.
you can have it delivered to your house.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jeff, for not being an asshole all the time. So we've got an old fashioned. We've got just some of the time when you're deconstructing a bridge so you can get your super yacht out in the ocean.
Yeah.
So we've got an old fashioned, and we're going to listen to some old school tunes.
So we talked about, what kind of music do we want to listen to with this old fashioned, and I thought, let's go back to the old, like the beginning. Like what are some of the bands that I can think of that all the bands that I listen to credit, like the next wave, which was like the Metallicas and the Megadeths and all that kind of stuff. What did they listen to? And so I thought, well, things that they had commonly, talked about were things like Zeppelin, Kiss, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple.
I mean,
So
seriously, you nailed
that was
it.
the first big four that I could think of.
Yeah.
And so obviously it gets a little heavier as the time goes on, but
Sure.
these are the first four that I could really think that would stand out and that I had heard my influences talk about.
Absolutely.
And so,
Well, and
that
we
had
probably
got me to
heard
listen to
too.
these songs. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had gotten me to listen to this older stuff, and you can start to think about it and hear where those influences come from. So the first track that I chose is Achilles' Last Stand, Led Zeppelin. You ever heard that song?
Let's listen.
Man.
Off the top of my head, I don't know the name, but I can't say that I haven't heard the song. What album is it off of?
This song is off of an album called Presence,
Okay.
and it's one of their later records. They're always known for a real melodic sort of
Yeah.
rock and roll type of
Sure.
band, but you know what I'm saying, like that chug.
So instantly, the first thing I think of is this seriously influenced Iron Maiden.
Yeah, that's exactly right, dude.
So
Has
my
to.
my wife calls it gallop metal.
It's galloping. That's what it is. That's
Yeah.
That's what the style of riff is called. It's
Yeah.
gallop.
Okay.
And I mean, it sounds like a horse just clopping.
Yeah.
clopping.
Absolutely. Well, and it you look at some of the top drummers of all time. John Bonham, I mean, is always almost number one on almost every single list. And the more I've listened to him, I get it. He was a great drummer, and he died really young. So I think that thought of expectation of what could he have done if he would have lived into his 40s, 50s, 60s,
Yeah.
as we see with some of these other drummers. But
Well, you
yeah.
can see the progression in their music. The last record they did was called In Through the Outdoor, and it was even completely different than this.
Yeah.
This was like, I think this may have been, it was like this, and then maybe Coda, and then maybe In Through the Outdoor, or like
okay.
somewhere around there. But you can really just tell the progression and where their music was going.
Absolutely.
And then Jimmy Page did a couple of records with guys like David Coverdale. And,
Yeah. Coverdale and Page. Yeah, that was a good
Coverdale
album.
Page, and then he also was in a band called The Firm.
Okay.
So if you've never heard The Firm, Coverdale, Page, it's killer, dude.
Okay.
But I think that's where Led Zeppelin would have gone.
Yeah. I mean, I can get the distortion out of this. This is early metal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that.
Zeppelin commonly says, we weren't a metal band, and I agree to an extent they were not, but they did have several songs like this that had metal riffs in them,
Right.
and totally led to the formation of the genre.
I agree. 100%. And
In fact, this song is cited by Dave Mustaine as being one of his biggest influences.
so when you have someone who's that instrumental in the development of a genre,
Yeah.
to say that this is an influence,
Yep.
you may not be in that category, but you definitely are part of.
For sure. I mean, and just that the guitars, people often talk about Jimmy Page being notorious for just being like a messy guitar player, and he is, but that's part of his charm.
Right.
He's just kind of a messy playing chords back there,
Yeah.
and then you got John Bonham just galloping.
Yeah.
John Bonham and John Paul Jones
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
bass.
They hold it together.
They're holding it down, just while Jimmy Page can just whack off, basically.
Well, it's funny that you say that because my buddy, I'll refer to him several times in this podcast, Jason. He went to recording studio school in Tempe, Mesa, Arizona, and while he was there, he was able to get access to a Jimmy Page just studio screw around session where it's just him playing guitar. And it's cool. He
love to hear
he
that.
sent it to me. I'll make sure that you get a chance to check it out.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm supposed to have it, but I do. And now it's out on the internet. Sorry, Jason. But yeah, really neat to hear. And it's using the word sloppy, I don't want it to discredit him because he's an amazing guitar
Oh,
player.
it's incredible.
But
It's just ridiculous in his time.
Right.
But I think he would tell you, yeah, I was sloppy, but like that's what we like about it. 'Cause
Yeah.
it was pushing boundaries of things that people just wanted to be like, crystal clarity and all that stuff, and he allowed people to be like, hey, you can still be kick-ass and
Right.
not be perfect.
Right.
It's okay, And that's the big message that I take from rock and roll, period, is that rock and roll's not supposed to be perfect. You
No.
know what I mean? and that's part of a big influence of mine.
The imperfection is the character of it for sure.
Now, as I gravitated more towards metal, metal doesn't really allow a whole lot of imperfection. There are cases, but usually the more pristine and tight and rhythmic you are, the better.
Right.
Or at least that's the perception.
Yeah.
But bands like us, like Let the Guilty Hang, like what we did is we allowed for a little bit of imperfection because it kept it human. You know what I'm saying? And if you remember, like back in the late 80s, early 90s Metallica era, they were a well-oiled machine. Like they were unfuckable with.
Right.
But as they started to grow older, they were like, you know what? We're kind of just going to let this fly and see where it goes. And they grew to like massive success because people could hear the humanistic qualities in their tunes.
Right. Well, and humanness is super crucial. I remember being in a Metallica show, and Nothing Else Matters, they were playing, and the crowd knew the lyrics, and James mixed up like the first chorus and the second chorus.
Yep.
And he called it out at the end. He said, I want to thank all of the fucking hardcore Metallica fans out there who got my lyrics right, because I totally screwed that up. Which was neat.
He does that from time to time. Like, he'll screw up some lyrics, and it's cool. Like, used to, they'd probably get pissed and, like, punch each other backstage, but, like, now it's cool.
I mean, how cool is it to be able to say, hey, I went to a Metallica show, and I feel that way.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I was robbed of my money because, and that is the one thing you can say about a live album is you get to hear things that are just unique to which I'm not a big live album fan, but you get the nuance of what that one concert was, which that's kind of cool.
And I think that's what you're going to hear with a lot of these older groups that we're going to listen to today is that they allowed, they weren't so perfect and like, they allowed the music to breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
It's almost like metal went backwards, or they just wanted to. The step that it took was just like, let's crunch this thing down and like really squeeze the shit out of it, so it can't be. So it has to be the most perfect.
Yeah.
And then they decided, you know what? That's not the way. Let's release a little bit.
Absolutely.
And a lot of newer bands, deathcore, hardcore, things like that, it's not really staccato. Like it's got like room to breathe, and only in like the thrash world will you hear like this thrash and death where everything's so tight. Like even the shit we listen to commonly on this show, like the tech death and stuff like that, it's so like crystal clear and like a lot of times. Bands like Vitriol will come in and be like, all right, we're just going to make a big ruckus.
Yeah, and they do. And that's why people are so enthralled by them, I think. It's because it is different.
Yep.
So have you ever seen the show F is for Family?
Heard of it, but
So it's cartoon Bill Burr. It's really funny. His son in that show, Kevin, has this band called Shire of Frodo.
Interesting.
And
I want to listen to it.
If I was running through the Shire in Lord of the Rings and there was a background soundtrack,
I feel like it's
this is it.
Dude.
This is it. Totally.
Me and my guys, we posed a question to each other one time, like, who would you want to listen to on an island all by yourself? Because we all love Metallica vehemently, like,
right.
But we also all love Led Zeppelin, and all of us were like, we'd rather have Zeppelin. No offense to Metallica, I'm like the most diehard Metallica fan that I know.
Right.
But there's just something about having the type of catalog that Led Zeppelin offers.
Yeah.
And, you get a little bit of the metal, you get a little bit of the, singer-songwriter type shit that you might...
Sure.
I don't love that type of genre, but, like, there's some stuff that Page and Plant did that were like, man, it's undeniable good.
Well, if you were out in a park somewhere and you were LARPing, this is what should be playing in the background. Or if you're sitting at home playing Dungeons and Dragons, this is what's playing in the background.
And I love it, man. It really is. And I go back every once in a while and just turn on some Zeppelin. My favorite record by Zeppelin is Physical Graffiti. And there's metal riffs on that here and there, but like nothing that to me stands out as like, this helped to push people into the genre.
Yeah.
Quite like this song. I mean, this song is
Sure.
the one.
Yeah.
Because you were right. You mentioned before we started, or maybe right at the beginning, that you can hear a lot of Iron Maiden in this. Song.
That's the first thing I heard when is that galloping bass drum and guitar was
And-
it's all that this is like the cornerstone of what Iron Maiden is centered around.
That's right.
With what's I can't remember the name. The drummer, I can see his face, blonde
the
hair.
First drummer was Clive Owen, and then it
Right,
was
he moved into
Nico McBrain.
and Nico is the
After
guy
Clive
that
died.
But I mean, just that's what I see is just and it's that galloping.
Yeah,
it's
dude.
great.
And it's just you don't realize it, but that's a 10-minute opus.
Oh well, and I'm sitting here. We've had a good lengthy conversation,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting here thinking that Aaron's favorite thing is a 2 to 3 minute basher, and he opens this episode with a 10-minute song. So
Yeah.
Tell me, this is the first old fashioned you've had, even though it's a modified old fashioned. I'll
It
give
is
you that.
I guess so.
What do you think?
mean, I don't have any basis of comparison, but I like that we smoked it. Now,
Yes,
the
that was
peated-
another thing I didn't talk
Yeah.
about is that I did smoke this
The
drink.
peated shit that you bring over sometimes is a little bit weird. I'm gonna keep tasting it. The more you bring it, I'll keep tasting it. But there's something. But I really enjoy the smoke.
It's a different smoke. So
Yeah.
if anybody out there is a peated Scotch drinker, which I absolutely love, and it's a very divisive flavor. It's either you love it or you hate it. And I think Aaron's in the middle, which is
Yeah.
rare because
I'm
I think you want to
trying.
give it a go. And I mean,
Yeah.
but that's your personality. You're like,
because
I'm
there's
gonna
something about it that I don't. That at first taste, I'm not like, man, I love this. But also in the back of my mind, I'm like, it's intriguing. And
sure.
I don't know. I feel like that's how we all kind of get to a point where we actually like something because you try it and you're like, I don't know, it's not perfect. But
Well, I mean, I was in my 40s when I started loving whiskey.
Same
Before
here,
that,
yeah. Well, I wasn't
this
40,
this
but-
stuff sucks, man. I'll drink something that I can't taste. That's the alcohol I drank back in the
Right,
day was
vodka.
something I couldn't
Just
taste,
vodka.
or I overpowered it with something like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
a Jaeger Red Bull, which is totally not good for you. But yeah, so the smoke is definitely helpful.
Yeah, it's cool,
But
man.
overall, the drink,
yeah, I think it's great. I think it tastes great. I think the whiskey tastes good. The cherry, obviously, I love that, and I can't wait to taste it after a little bit of the whiskey's gotten more
that
infused
that
into it.
last bite, a whiskey infused Luxardo cherry is dessert.
So
for
the
sure.
second song that we're going to listen to is actually a song that my high school band covered. When we were like 16, 17 years old.
Perfect.
A common band that you hear metal bands these days talk, or in the early days talk about, is Kiss. And so, you wanted the best, you got the best. Kiss. This song is called War Machine. And if there was a metal riff better than this in 1980, let me know, because, dude, they were putting it down.
Yeah.
I mean, genre-wise, it's doomy.
Yeah,
It's just
very.
straight up heavy metal.
Yeah. Yeah, is that it's that introduction to, and I can see how people were really afraid for their children
Oh my God! dude.
initially.
Could you imagine? I think this record was 80 or 82, maybe. I'm not sure. One of those two. And yeah, it was a little bit later on into Kiss's career, considering they started in the late 60s, early 70s. But that was a time for their disco rock and
Right.
They went through that phase, and they went through like things like everybody knows Rock and Roll All Night, right?
Right.
And yeah, that was a big part of it. But like when they started really digging in and grabbing some of those minor note tracks like this,
Yeah.
that's groovy, dude. Like
It is. This is groovy. This feels dirty, and it's nice.
you could just sit and drink to this all night, man.
Well, or in the morning.
Or in the morning, yeah. Just
Salute.
035, dude, on the fretboard. Then you got that minor note right there.
Yeah. Dude, it's a.
And you got to think about some of the guys like you know, the early Megadeth dudes and the Slayer dudes and all that stuff, listening to this stuff growing up, like they had to be fucking like, their mind was blown because they were exposed to the Beatles and, you know, early blues rock and shit like that.
Right.
And all of a sudden this record comes out and they're like, you can't listen to this. This is the devil's shit. You know, like their parents were pissed.
Well, but that process has happened across the board. I mean, a great movie, way different than what we talk about on this show, Ray, which is Jamie Foxx playing Ray Charles.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a great movie.
Fantastic.
He's a fantastic actor and musician. He played all that stuff. But to see what they went through, you know, Ray Charles brought in a lot of scripture type component. There was a lot of biblical elements, and then he was putting it to song and people dancing to it. And your hardcore side was like, that's, how are you dancing to this? That's
Right.
it's like, really?
Well,
That
they instantly went to Satanism on everything. It's got to be Satanism.
everything that's uncomfortable, that's outside of your comfort zone, you label as being evil.
It's of the devil.
The fear of the unknown is one of the most detrimental things to the human species. And what you said about the intrigue of a peated whiskey still bringing you back and not pushing you away is a great example of how people overcome something that prevents them from growing.
I agree, and as you say that, I'm tasting the peated whiskey. Right.
I'll bring more. So I think that this is a great opportunity to plant the idea that you and I are mulling over a different or an additional YouTube channel where we talk about things that are not. I don't want to say what we're doing here is superficial, because I think it's just fun.
It's fun.
But I want, and you had this great idea, and I think it's brilliant, of diving deeper. And you said the idea of deep thoughts, and the first thing I thought of was Jack Handey from Saturday Night Live. Deep Thoughts by Jack Handey.
Jack Handey.
But yeah, taking the opportunity to have critical thinking and exposing yourself to something that's uncomfortable to immerse yourself in the idea of expanding your mind.
Yeah, I love that. I love
So,
that idea.
anyway,
So this is
that was a great track, man.
Dude, that song.
That I mean, I am definitely not a huge Kiss fan.
Yeah, me either.
I do love the idea that people took the time to say Knights in Satan's Service, because
Yeah,
you know,
it's
I mean,
crazy.
you got a whole slew of face painted Jews up on stage making a lot of money, and you're going to call them Satanists. That just makes me
it's
laugh.
bizarre.
It's whatever.
I heard that shit too growing up. I was like, man, this is. Once I actually listened, I wonder, like, have these people heard, you know, Slayer and fucking
Right.
Morbid Angel and all these bands that are actually, you know, dive into, whether they're Satanists or not, they actually dive into the real satanic type things.
Right. Well, I mean, you have bands then like Mayhem or that actually are probably
murdered people.
who do actually take on that persona. That is actually who they are from a spiritual standpoint. A little different than those people who are using it for marketing purposes or
shock value. Mean, they were the first to wear masks. And
eyeliner,
makeup and all that shit.
And it's interesting because I'll never forget when I watched Private Parts, the Howard Stern movie.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And there was a scene, and I don't know how true it is to reality, but I think it's probably pretty true. They stated the statistics of who listened to the Howard Stern show and how long. And the people who listened to Howard Stern because they liked him listened for X amount of time, which was a lot of time. It was like 3.5 hours at a swath. Then the people who listened to Howard Stern because they hated him actually listened longer than the people who were listening to him because they said that they liked him, which is amazing that you have that, what that emotion drives people to do.
Yeah. It's wild, man.
So
this is another track from a band that I often heard a lot of my influences talk about, Deep Purple.
Oh, yeah.
And, they have the standard, Smoke on the Water riff that everybody learns when you're first learning guitar.
Sure. Which we put some smoke on our water.
Yeah. Blind Woman in Tokyo and things like that.
Yeah.
But this is my favorite Deep Purple song. Always has, always will be, Highway Star.
Oh, yeah.
You ever heard this song?
Yes.
Yeah, dude. It's a good one, man.
I think I have their best of album. And
You got to, man. You got to
I mean-
love it, man. I still go back and listen to Deep Purple quite a lot, actually. Whenever I go on my deep dives of like, I've been listening to a lot of Black Sabbath again lately. I always cycle, through these kind of bands like this, like Cream and
Sure.
Zeppelin and things of that sort.
Dude, Cream,
They had the riffs too, man. They really did.
Well, I mean-
and I considered putting them in the list, but I
Eric-
only got time for a couple.
well, when you throw in a 10-minute intro song, it doesn't make it easy.
I didn't think that one through.
But see, that chug, yeah, they have that chug and that almost that galloping good
And
riff again.
to incorporate a keyboard with a chugging guitar riff, like
Well, and his voice has almost a Dave Mustaine.
yeah, dude. And it's very heavily reverbed, echoed,
Sure.
things of that sort to kind of give it those sort of like depth, and
Yeah.
that's what all those bands did back in the day. You listen to the early thrash records; they're all doing like massive reverb, echo,
Well,
delay.
you had to do something different to pull you out of rock.
Yeah,
And even the basic metal. I mean, we're going to get to Black Sabbath, I'm assuming, is the last band, which is, I think, quoted as being the grandfather of, or the father
it all, dude.
of metal. Everybody says it. But they're doom metal. I mean, that first metal feel was a doomy. It wasn't fast.
Sure.
It was slow. So when you get into your thrash, they had to do something that was going to pull them apart and make that separation.
And I think that some of the bands that we're listening to, like Deep Purple and Zeppelin and all that, they were listening to each other. Like they weren't oblivious to the fact
No.
that Black Sabbath was creating something.
Sure.
Deep Purple was creating something. And so I feel like they probably, much in the way that bands do these days, or like bands like we did back 20 years ago, we fed off each other and was like, okay, that's cool. I mean, let's think about how the whole thrash metal movement started in the Bay Area. They all were like, we want to play faster, harder,
Right.
better.
And they listened to each other. They were going to each other's shows.
Absolutely, they were touring together.
That's why you have that cluster. Your thrash metal in the Bay Area. You have a massive amount of your death metal scene starting in Tampa, Florida.
Yeah.
A lot of those bands were next to each other, or Buffalo, New York.
From Buffalo,
Right.
they moved to Tampa.
Absolutely,
To get involved in that.
because it exposes you to, and you can play those smaller clubs with each other, and then you can see what each other are doing.
Yeah. Yeah, so we got Dio here.
I mean, which could have been a band
Definitely.
that we put here.
Could have.
Because, I mean, wasn't he the singer for the second half
He
of
was.
Black Sabbath?
Yep, he was in Black Sabbath for a bit,
When Ozzy decided to go and do his solo project?
which was also awesome. Like, I just love the history of metal, like when I think about it. And
Yeah.
I actually did a paper on it in English 101, in fact.
Probably about the only way you can make that class palpable.
Oh, dude, it's the only thing that I can think of.
Palatable, not palpable, palatable.
Palatable. And I thought, like, how can I make something that I can really like, because I always thought, you ever seen that movie Euro Trip?
Oh, yeah.
Not Euro Trip, Road Trip.
Yeah.
So that's
Seen
where I
both
got
of
the
them.
idea for that paper from, because he was like, the trick is to make it something that you understand. And I understand rock and roll and metal.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, if I'm going to do a paper, how can I parlay that into a rock and roll or metal type of thing?
Sure.
Which is something that I love. And it was the best paper, according to my professor, that I've done, and he used it to teach others.
Well, but it's a brilliant. That's really smart, because if you're doing something you don't like doing,
Yeah.
but you
do a
can
lot every day.
connect it to something you do, it all of a sudden makes it a better process for sure.
Listen to those notes, dude. He's shredding.
Yeah.
That's a fucking shredder.
Yeah,
in
that's
the
moving.
70s.
Right.
That's Richie fucking Blackmore, dude. Shredding.
So imagine that you take that.
Shredding on a Fender Stratocaster, dude. That was commonly used for just like surf rock and blues.
So that's so funny that you say that, because that's about exactly what I was about to say. if you throw some distortion on that, that would be heavy as hell.
Yeah, dude.
So they actually did that.
See
Where
that tremolo at the end?
yeah, which thank you. There was a video online, and that's what it said. If you took death metal and you took away all distortion, what would it be?
Oh,
and it was basically just high-speed surfer music. It sounded like someone took the Beach Boys and they did a shit ton of coke, and they were just like going, "Wah!" It was crazy. I think I might have sent it to you a while ago.
Like, if you take Metallica and turn the distortion off, it's just surf music.
It's surf music, which is hilarious.
Yeah, dude.
But you nailed that. That's so great, and he does. He shreds on that.
Oh, he's just ripping, man. And like, they didn't even know that they were creating something like a genre.
Well, I don't necessarily know. They knew they were creating something, obviously, because they're freaking artists, but
they didn't know.
They didn't know what was going to create afterward. Yeah, the domino effect that they create.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Or, maybe we're not giving them enough credit. Maybe they did know.
Who knows?
Maybe they did know.
This last track is the fathers of all metal.
And so that brings us to why we made this drink, why we had this show. Yeah. And I thought it was really important for us to pay homage to where we came from. Obviously, I didn't want to start here. Mm-hmm. But I think that having, now we're on the 10th episode.
Yeah.
It's a great chance for us to reflect. I don't think that Pink Floyd is heavy, and that's the shirt that I'm sporting today. But
every fucking heavy band,
Pink Floyd, man, their guitar work is
David Gilmour is one of the greatest guitar players of all time,
and their solo
he showed
capability.
Us all how to bend like we needed to be,
right? And so that's where my heart lies. I probably don't need to go into this, but I'm going to anyway because we're a few drinks in. My computer went through a series of fuck ups, and I've been going through all of my music again because I rate things, I playlist them. I'm very infatuated with the idea of quick access and mood related things and all that. So I'm going through, and I started at Z and I'm working my way back to A so I can rate things. And I just yesterday went through all of the Pink Floyd. And it was superb.
It's a good time.
So a lot of the songs I'm clicking on, I'm rating them and moving on. Not Pink Floyd. I touched every single song. I listened to it in full, and it took me a whole workday to get through easily the stuff that I had not had rated that I'm having to go back through. And so to hear this old school stuff, man, your idea for this today was top notch.
Yeah, man.
Give
and
you
this
props.
is probably my I don't know that it's my favorite Black Sabbath riff. I toyed back and forth between two songs.
You told me you were going to tell me a story about this. I want to hear it.
So I'm going to go ahead and start the track. This is Children of the Grave.
Okay.
And if you're talking about just pure raw metal, like early metal and at its finest, I think it's this track, dude. But there's a song that they did on the Sabotage record called Symptom of the Universe that was pretty fucking great as well. And actually, the very first time I heard Symptom of the Universe was not by Black Sabbath. It was by Sepultura.
Oh, yeah.
Who covered that,
absolutely. Which, that tells you something.
Yeah.
When you have such an amazing, what would you say, thrash groove band.
Brazilian bad motherfuckers.
Absolutely. The Calvera brothers.
Oh, but dude.
Dude.
Riff, dude. That's heavy as shit.
Yeah.
Dude.
And for the time, when did this come out? 1970 something?
Late 70s.
Yeah.
Mid-70s.
So you can imagine that people who are jamming this, their car blasting.
They had Joe Cocker, and then
right.
And then this comes out on the radio. What would you do?
It was not on the same station.
No, dude.
It was not. They had to make a new station for stuff like this.
Yeah.
Or they played it like at midnight if they actually played something that late.
I was watching a lot of Black Sabbath documentaries over the last week, and they were talking about how they used a lot of biblical lyrical content and things, and so they were pulling stuff out of the Bible to sing about, but the Christians were like super pissed about it. Like they were like, "Oh, this is the devil they're talking about," but like they're literally quoting your book.
so that ties perfectly back to the conversation about Ray, of how you're singing gospel music or singing about the gospel, and then it's Satan because you're dancing to it.
Yeah, or
that,
you have more distorted guitars than the last guy.
right. It's just
So stupid.
But it's interesting because I think it was you sent me a link, and I've been listening to a lot of him. What, Sam Harris?
Yeah.
So
That's great.
It's amazing how much more so the Old Testament than the New Testament discusses the proper way to have slaves.
Ooh.
So it's interesting to me that, I mean, you've got this book of morality.
Mm-hmm.
This is a preview to hopefully a new YouTube channel that
Maybe
Aaron and I
segue.
create. But yeah, and so the fact that they're quoting or utilizing passage as a means of conveying musical capability, and then people then turn around and say, well, this is the devil.
Yeah, dude. It's weird. This is weird. Like what? Do you really read your books?
No. I think what it is a lot of people, and I'm not saying everybody here, I think that there are some amazing people who have faith. They pull the parts out that they want for convenience.
Oh, for sure. I know they do that. But like, it's cool. It's cool to think about a God created the world, but because he told Isaac to go kill his son, that's not okay. Like, we wouldn't worship that, but he did tell him to do that.
According to the book,
Yeah.
it was written by people,
People, not a deity. I don't know. When I go. But what was
If-
also written by people is this awesome chug riff.
which they nailed it, man. I mean, for the time frame, I mean, I was born in 1978. So to think that there was stuff like
I think
this.
this record came in. This is Masters of Reality, so maybe 74.
Oh, so
75?
even before me.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think
We're listening to a
it's
song
one of the
that's
It's one of the first few records. They did like maybe 2 or 3 records. This is like the third one, I believe.
so if this hypothetically, and we'll obviously fact check this,
Yeah.
but if this was 74, that means that this song is 50 years old.
yeah, dude, and it still carries weight.
50 years old.
Those riffs are killer, man.
Just
And bands still cover them. I just recently saw Stone Sour. A couple years ago, Stone Sour put out a covers EP with 5 songs on it, and one of them was this.
oh wow, I need to check that out because
It
dude,
rules, dude.
man, I
They're great.
do really like Stone Sour. I mean, Corey Taylor's a great artist, and whether people like Slipknot and Stone Sour or not, it doesn't matter. He is a good
Who
artist.
cares? Yeah, they're great.
I think they do
Except
great
for
work.
him- I will say his solo work's kind of crappy. It's
You
not
know,
my thing.
he-
If you like it, it's great, but it's not my thing.
I've never really listened to his solo work. I did listen to the song that he did with Zakk Wylde, who is the lead guitarist for Ozzy Osbourne currently and is an amazing artist, and I think is the one who's playing Dimebag stuff on
Fuck
the
yeah, he
Pantera
is.
tour. So they actually did a great collab, which was a little bit more acoustic mellow, which again shows the diversity of some of these artists who can play stuff that is just straight up flat out beat down, but then can play something that you might slow dance to weirdly with your lady.
You mentioned Zach. That instantly makes me think of maybe that's episode 11. We don't know yet.
We're gonna hash that out over probably
see.
another beverage. And so one thing I want to do is pay some homage to this guy right here on choosing just great tunes for all of our episodes. Pretty much,
Thanks.
he's the one who's done all of the musical selections minus a couple.
And the great drinks.
Dude, I enjoy bringing
This
some
guy
knowledge,
This guy brings the pairing, dude. It's always a great pairing.
and so to Aaron,
Cheers, my friend.
cheers.
All right, you guys enjoy. We'll see you back
Episode
for
11.
episode 11. Coming up.